Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. It is Thursday. Let us begin with a brief overview of where we are up to in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, 14 volumes. We're in book number 10, the book of Tara of purity, which has 8 subjects, 144 chapters. We are nearing the end of these 8 subjects. We are currently in the laws of Keilim, so vessels, second to the end. We've covered these other 6 topics, so now on to the 7th topic, the laws of vessels. 28 chapters. We'll be spending about another 3 weeks on this. We've spent a week on it already. Just a breakdown of what the chapter on vessels speaks about. This next page is not from the Rambam. First, general guidelines of which vessels are susceptible to impurity. Then we spoke a few chapters on wood and then leather. Today we begin a discussion on metal, and we'll spend about 5 chapters on that. And then on earthenware, attachments, clothes, midras, and finally liquids. Let's take a look at today's chapter relating to metals. Just a brief overview of what we're discussing in the first few halachas. We first give the principle that metal needs to be complete. We'll see that inside. And then we give lots of different examples. Each example, whether that particular item is complete or it is not complete, along with some principles along the way. Let us take a look. Halacha number 1. All metal keilim are not susceptible to ritual impurity until the tasks involved in fashioning them are totally complete. And there are no further tasks to be performed with them at all. Unfinished metal keilim, by contrast, are not susceptible to impurity at all. So when it comes to metal, you want it complete. You don't want to be dealing with raw metal. Not in general, you get hurt, but also in the context of impurity, even if you won't get hurt, as long as it's raw, it's not yet a vessel. It's not yet susceptible. So what are examples? Anything that still needs to be smoothed with a file. It needs to be leveled. Its uneven points need to be scraped away. It needs to be polished. It needs to get a little bit of a clap on its head with a hammer. Don't worry, not a person, an item. Or is lacking a handle or room. You can't actually handle it yet. Try handling a boiling hot cup of coffee without a handle. Such a utensil is not susceptible to impurity until it was finished and beautified to the extent that no work is required at all. So only once the metal item is complete is it susceptible to impurity. Let's look at lots of examples. What is implied? A sword does not contract impurity until it has been smoothed, or a knife until it has been sharpened. Similar concepts apply with regards to other comparable acts. Accordingly, when one makes utensils from a block of iron ore, a bar of metal, the iron surface of a wheel, plates, coverings of utensils, from the base of utensils, from the rims of utensils, from the handles of utensils, from metal scrap removed from utensils or pieces cut away from utensils, they are all pure. These are incomplete. For all of these are considered as unfinished metal utensils. They are unfinished. If, however, one fashions a utensil from a broken metal utensil, so it was already a utensil, and then it got a little bit broken, and now you are modifying it, or from utensils that have worn out over the course of time, or from nails that were made from utensils, these are susceptible to impurity because they are not in an unfinished state. They were already finished, and now they're just a little bit broken, but still somewhat functional. If, however, it is not known whether these nails were made from utensils which were finished, or they were made from blocks of iron ore which were never finished, then they are pure. Even if they were formed into a vessel, they are not susceptible to impurity until they're a finished product. Now, if you have something, you're just missing the cover. Is that considered complete? If it's missing its cover? Can you have a pot without a cover? Can you cook in a pot without a cover? Yes, no?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. It is, thank you, Michelle. It is susceptible to ritual impurity. The cover is not considered as part of the kli itself. When a needle was made without a hole, but instead was smoothed and prepared for use in such a state at the outset. So you're actually not using it for sewing, but you're using it rather to remove splinters or the like. Then it is susceptible to impurity because it can be used to remove a splinter. If ultimately, however, one does intend to make a hole in it, then it is like other unfinished metal utensils and is not susceptible to impurity. So here intention plays a role. What is your intention with this needle? Is it going to be used for splinters or for sewing? If it's for sewing, it's not complete till you have that hole. If it's to remove splinters, then it's good to go. You have explained, continuing along, that according to scriptural law, unfinished metal keilim are pure, and unfinished metal keilim are pure. They're not yet considered susceptible, as opposed to unfinished wooden keilim. Even though they're unfinished, they are already impure. So that's where we have a stringency of wood over metal in many scenarios. Conversely, a flat metal keilim is impure, even if it's flat. If it's still a vessel, utensil, even if it can't hold anything in it, then it still is impure if it's finished. And a flat wooden keilim is pure. So that what that means is in these two examples of finished or unfinished, or receptive or not receptive, keilim that are impure when made from wood, namely unfinished, are pure when made from metal. And keilim that are impure when made from metal, namely with a receptacle, are pure when made from wood. So that's just getting that clear. Now, all articles of war, a sword, a spear, a helmet, armor, soldiers' boots, and the like, are susceptible to ritual impurity. They are considered utensils. So now we're actually moving on to a bit of a different discussion of what actually qualifies as a metal item. What is considered a kli, a utensil, an item, a thing. All ornaments for humans, for example, a necklace, earrings, rings, whether with a seal or without a seal. Back in the day, that's how people gave their signature, with their ring or the like, are susceptible to ritual impurity. They are utensils, they are items, they're keilim. Even if a dinar was disqualified for use, so you had a coin that was so deteriorated that you wouldn't even be able to use it to buy anything, but then it was adapted to be hung from the neck of a girl. You turned it into a necklace. It is susceptible to ritual impurity because it is a thing. It maybe is no longer a coin, but it is a necklace. Similarly, a metal amulet is susceptible to impurity, just like other jewelry for humans. But all ornaments made for animals, used for animals, and keilim by contrast, for example, rings made from whether for animals. Yeah. For example, the rings made from the neck of an animal, for the neck of an animal. There we go. A ring that's made to go around the neck of an animal, and for the handles of keilim. Meaning an item that's there to serve another item. You have a handle that's there to serve another item. These are not susceptible, they're pure. Independently, with the exception of the bell of an animal. Why would animals have bells?
To let you know where they are.
Exactly.
To know where they are.
Correct. Or a kli that creates a sound desired by humans, because if it's a bell of an animal, it's actually not an animal's utensil, it's a human's utensil. It's your bell, which the animal is triggering so that you know where he is. What is implied? When one makes bells for a spice mill, why would people put bells onto a spice mill? The noise would actually help the spices taste better. Not sure exactly how that works. Maybe in modern terms, sometimes builders work best with blasting music. But anyhow, a cradle, book covers, children's diapers, these are all pure. They're not considered as utensils. If one made clappers for them, they are susceptible to impurity. Why? Because they're for an adult. Since they were made to create a sound for a person, they are considered as ornaments for humans. Even if the clapper was removed afterwards, they are still susceptible to impurity because it is still fit to generate a sound by hanging it on a shard. So even if it doesn't have a built-in little thing in the middle, it still can be, that bell can still be knocked against the gate. The following rules apply when a bell was made for a person. If it was made for a child, it's not susceptible to impurity unless it has a clapper, because then it's there for the adults to know where the child is. If it was made for an adult, it is considered as an ornament, like a ring, and is susceptible to impurity, even though it does not have a clapper, because you could knock it into something else. All masks, by the way, he's talking about metal masks, so maybe my WhatsApp wasn't so accurate but misleading. But all masks are susceptible to impurity. They're an ornament for the person. All seals are pure, with the exception of a metal seal that is used to imprint a seal. Because if it's not a metal seal, then it's not made to hold things. Right? It doesn't have it's not a receptacle. I think that's the reason. All rings are pure except the rings worn on a finger. Not sure what the other ones are. I mean, I know where else people could have. I guess that's a bracelet. Not sure. In contrast, here we go. The ring used to gird one's loins, the one that is tied between one's shoulders, is pure. It's not considered a utensil. It's not an ornament. A ring used as an animal collar is susceptible to impurity because a person uses it to pull the animal, so it's actually serving the person of the animal. Similarly, a staff made of metal used to control that animal is susceptible to impurity because although it's being used on the animal, it's being used for the person. So, all vessels can become susceptible to impurity through thought. Just by deciding that you're going to use it in this way, and this is how it's complete, it's susceptible. But once it is susceptible, they will not lose that susceptibility unless you actually do something to change it. So it's a one-way valve, one-way thought. A deed negates the influence of a previous deed or thought, but thought does not negate the influence of a previous thought or action. Obviously, actions are more powerful than thoughts. What is implied, at least in this context? Tanya does speak in one of the chapters about how a thought could actually be very damaging because it's very much a part of the person, but not in this context. What is implied? A ring used for an animal or a kli that one thought to use as a ring for a person, or a kli that one thought to use as a ring for a person. So originally it was serving an animal, and now you decided, you know what, I'm going to use this for a person instead. That thought itself causes a change in the ring status and makes it subject to ritual impurity. As if originally it was made with the intent of being used for humans. Originally it was made that ring was made to go on the monkey's finger. And then like, actually, that's such a nice ring. I'm going to take it from my monkey and I'll use it myself. Just the thought alone, very few examples where thought has such an influence. This is one of them. Just the thought alone makes it now susceptible to ritual impurity. Now it's a human utensil, not an animal's utensil. Comments? Correct. Thought can make it susceptible to impurity, but once it is susceptible to impurity, if you took a human ring and decided to use it for an animal, that would not work. In fact, even if you took an animal ring and just thought of using it for a human, and then thought actually not a good idea, and you didn't do a thing, you were just sitting in the monkey park and you saw that monkey had a ring and you decided you wanted it, and you made a resolution in your mind that you're going to use it for yourself. Maybe it has to be yours, in your monkey park, because we've all got monkey parks. Anyhow, if I'm sitting in my garden and I'm with my monkeys and I decide that I'm going to take one of the rings of one of the monkeys, then and then I decide actually not a good idea. Who knows what's been on that ring? So then the halacha is that it still is susceptible, because once I made that original thought, that it became for humans, and to take it away from being susceptible, you needed action. If afterwards and reconsidered and thought to leave it as a ring for an animal as it was, it remains susceptible to impurity, even though it was never used as an ornament. No action was ever taken. For one thought does not negate the effect of another thought unless one performs an action a deed in the actual physical substance of the entity, for example, to polish it or to adjust it, is done for an animal. So if you had that ring, the animal's still wearing it, and you just decided you wanted it, and then you decided you don't want it. So the second thought does not negate the first thought. But if after deciding it will be good for the animal, for you actually took it and you reshaped it for the animal, so that it no longer is susceptible because you've done an action to undo your original thoughts. If there was a ring used for humans and one thought to use it for an animal, it is still susceptible to impurity as it was originally. Because as we said, a clear susceptibility to impurity cannot be nullified by thought. As you've mentioned in the chat, you can make it susceptible to thought, but you can't make it no longer susceptible to thought. If one performed a deed, changing it into an animal's ring, it's not susceptible to impurity because an action can influence a previous action. Halacha Aleph. The deeds of a deaf, mute, mentally or emotionally compromised individual or minor are significant, but not their thoughts. As explained above with regards to making food susceptible to impurity. So if a child decided that he wanted to use that monkey ring, then that's still not susceptible. But if he does something to it, then it makes it susceptible. When one thought of using a bell used for a door, then it now is receptive. Now you might ask, the doorbell was also for humans. It was for humans, but it was still one item serving another item. Door is the first item, and we said when you have one item serving a second, then it's not susceptible. And once you decide you're going to use it for an animal, so this thought makes it susceptible. When I made the bell of an animal suitable for a door, even if you attach it to the ground, and even when you attach it with a nail, it still remains susceptible to impurity until one performs a deed affecting the substance of the bell itself. So it's not so much about what you do with the bell, but actually changing the form of the bell itself in some way. The following laws apply when a craftsman makes and carries stock of bells for both animals and doors, which are neither susceptible. Actually, the animal ones would be susceptible, the door ones not. And he's made them with dual function. If the majority of his stock is made for entities that cause them to be susceptible to impurity, meaning in this example, they're made for animals, which means it's for people, then the entire stock is considered as susceptible to ritual impurity unless he sets aside a portion specifically for entities that do not cause them to be susceptible to impurity, unless he decided that these ones will be for the doors. If the majority is made for entities that do not cause them to be susceptible to impurity, like for the door, the entire stock is not considered as susceptible to ritual impurity unless he sets aside a portion of the stock specifically for entities that cause them to be susceptible to impurity, like unto a child or an animal, which is ready for adults. The final two halachas: whenever bells are found, they are susceptible to impurity because we assume that they may have been made for humans to hear them on an animal or a child, except in large cities. For there, the majority are actually made for doors, which we say is one item serving a second item, which makes it not qualified to be susceptible. Finally, halacha number 15, if a person tells a craftsman, make me 2 bells, one for the door and one for an animal. 2 mats, one to lie on and one to use as in constructing a tent. 2 sheets, one for designs and one for a curtain of it for a tent. They both are susceptible to impurity unless he explicitly states this is for this purpose and this is for the other. Otherwise, they're both being made partially for a purpose which makes them susceptible.